Okay. Hey, how's it? My name is Matt. I'm a photographer. I live in the beautiful island of Maui. And in this video, we are talking about the significance of your backgrounds in your photos. So, first of all, let's talk about your backgrounds and why they're important. So, the first and foremost, when you're shooting a subject, whether it's indoor or outdoor, it doesn't matter what you're shooting. The backdrop is going to help create a little bit of separation between your subject and your background. Now, if that's what you are looking to do, then probably this video is not going to be for you, but sometimes people want to include a subject within the background, and that's completely fine. It can also give you a sense of place, or it can create confusion on your subject and where are they? What are they doing? What's around them? And that's okay too. It also creates depth. So, the depth of your subject, like right now, I tend to kind of go into the background behind me. And this is why I chose this background because it's very busy and it kind of touches on the previous point. But if I were to move forward, it's going to create separation from my background to where I'm currently at to closer to the camera. Now, since we are talking about backgrounds, I do want to talk a little bit about how I use my backgrounds and how I achieve looks in my photos to create the separation. So first and foremost, I'm filming this on a telephoto lens. It's a 70 to 200 Mark II G Master, and we're going to be looking at some of these lenses over here on how I create some of these looks. So the other day, what inspired me really to make this video, I was just out in the backyard. I saw this lizard and the background was just really cool. And I thought, well, let's see if I can take some photos of this lizard and see. So let's zoom in here real quick. And this is probably the photo that you saw in the profile picture or the cover photo. And I thought it was really interesting that you can create so much separation in such a small little subject by just altering the background. Now, I shot this with 135 mil, no, 110 mil lens. And I just want to show you when you zoom into this, how much separation happens between the background and the subject, and it makes my subject stand out way more than it would have otherwise if I was further back. Now, I shot this pretty open. I believe this was at 6.3, so it wasn't a ton stop down, but it is really important that we understand that if you are trying to achieve a look in your photo, we have to understand how to do it. I personally create these looks by using telephoto lenses. We'll have an example later on where we look at a wider angle lens and just achieves a different type of look. But now the reason why I chose this subject, again, because of the background. So if I zoom way out here, these are trees. It's probably 20 yards away or so, and I'm pretty close to this subject. So when we look at the next example here, you can see that the background isn't really that busy. And when he started flaring out here, I'm not too sure what to call this bit right here and this lizard, but when he started flaring out, it was kind of drowning out here in this background. It wasn't as cool. So I stood up a little bit and the background really changed because now I'm shooting against a pretty much solid green background versus this option here. The light was coming through the trees and it was creating all of these like beautiful little bokeh balls. So what I did is I stood up and simply took the photo. So now it changes the photo completely that I have something a little bland in the background. There's I would have to say it's so blown out that it's pretty solid green for the most part, but the red really pops out in this lizard in this scenario. So now here's the same photo now without the flare. And I will say that he's got a pretty cute expression on his face, but you can see the big difference between the subject changing with the big vibrant red and not having it. So pretty cool though, that you can kind of determine, or that you can see there's a huge difference between those two. So anyways, this was the rest of the background up here in the trees that you can see. So he turned and moved and he was really patient, but you see how the background here, it's pretty busy. And in my opinion, it's not as nice of a photo as the initial photo that we took here with the background like this. I think for the most part, we can probably all agree that this particular photo is more appealing to the eye. It's more interesting in my opinion. Bokeh really is something that I love. It's my style of photography, so not everyone has the same style. And in fact, some people say they don't like the f2.8 look or what have you not, and I personally really do. So let's talk about now that we're kind of getting into our conversation further about backgrounds here. So this is a photo that I took for a client. She called me up and said, "Hey, I really need this like right now, like right today, like within the next hour. Can we get it done? I got to email it out." Sure, no problem. I went over, we just went out in the backyard into the woods. And while I understand now that you know it's the woods, it's a little hard to determine exactly what the backdrop is. I kind of always refer to some of these as like senior photos, where you have a background in the back, and the kid's standing there, and it's kind of like I don't really know what that texture is, but I again achieve this look with telephoto lenses. So I used this lens right here. This is the 300 millimeter f2.8 by Sony. It is a G Master lens, and you can always tell the quality of your lens, or at least a really good indicator is by the background and by the blur. The subject, I know she's in focus and that's great, but I mean, just like zooming way in here, it's pretty smooth, I would have to say. So it's nice to see. I really enjoy seeing that in my photos, and I really like having that style of background in my photos. It gives you a tiny sense of place, but not really in this particular one, just because that's the look that we were going to achieve and try to shoot for. So next photo here, I want to talk a little bit about foreground as well as background. So I already know what lens I shot this with. I shot it with the 200 to 600 lens, and the reason I can tell is that the foreground is so blown out here, yet I still have quite a bit of detail in the background. So now I've kind of flipped the roles here, and I locked in on my subject. I created a little a scene, I guess, if you will, in front of me in between myself and the subject. And now I've got these tea leaves right here that are completely blown out and bokeh'd out, as we would say. Subject is clearly in focus, and then you can tell back towards a tractor and the background here that it is still. I don't want to call it in focus because it's not in focus. You can tell right there how soft it is, but then it slowly fades out into the background. And I know that I was shooting at a wider aperture, so it's probably a 6.3. I would have to look at the file details and take a look back at it. But let's also now talk about your subject location relevant to the background. So I was at the airport. I took this photo here. I took two series of photos here. So the first one is the background is there. There was zero clouds in the sky. There's nothing interesting happening. The ocean is literally right on the other side of the trees here at the Kahului airport. And it's nice that you can see the trees, but now take a look at this photo and compare it. I planned the background to be a little bit more included in the photo. While some of this, yes, is luck, right? I mean, I can't ask the helicopter as he's taking off or is departing down the runway to say, "Hey, would you mind changing?" Like, it doesn't work like that in a lot of my photography because I'm shooting a lot of candid things, or a lot of like unplanned things. So it just makes a really big difference to have your background either be really included or maybe not included at all, or have something a little interesting in the background. In this case, these trees, in my opinion, really enhance the photo compared to the first option that we looked at, where you just see the tip of the trees. And I don't personally find this photo to be as engaging as this photo. Now, I did shoot this with the 400 millimeter f2.8. So this is it here. It is an absolute beast of a lens, and this is not something that everyone's going to be able to have in their collection. However, I do feel really fortunate that I do own these lenses and that they are part of my collection, and it is one of the biggest secrets that I have. In my opinion, I don't know if it's a secret, but in my opinion, it is one of my secrets, quote unquote, that I use to achieve looks that I want. So this photo here was also taken with the 400 millimeter lens. And I think it's important to understand that I understand that it is not a traditional portrait lens that you would use. Carrying this lens around on a photo shoot, it's not practical. It doesn't really make sense. It's heavy. It's inconvenient because I'm farther away from the client, but I don't care. The point is that I achieved the look that I wanted using the lens that I wanted to shoot with. And I highly encourage anybody out there that's watching this video, grab an unconventional lens that you normally would not use and bring it to your next shoot. Or bring it and go take some photos of your pet, or go take photos of friends or something if you're unsure of how it's going to react. I strongly believe that using different styles and techniques compared to what everyone else is doing is my style. Okay, so if everyone's standing here, I don't want to be there taking photos. I want to be way over there. I will never sacrifice my creativity in order just to get standard photos that everyone else is getting. And, they go home and post them on Instagram and it's the same exact photo that 3 other people got. I don't want those types of photos. I want the look and feel to be different. And I want the look and feel to be a look that you can tell that it's a photo of mine, if that makes sense. So your backgrounds, also going back to the helicopter here with motion blur. Now, motion blur and super telephoto lenses it's a really difficult to achieve because there's a lot of misses. But with a lot of practice, you can learn a little bit more about your panning technique. And while I wish there was a little bit more clouds or a little bit more action in the blue area, it's kind of dull. I think that it's very evident that this aircraft is in a forward moving direction, and that's the look that I achieved through this photo, is by using a telephoto lens and by panning and getting the motion blur on the ground and the runway there. The next photo that we will look at is a wider angle lens. I am not really a big fan of wider angles, and yes, I do have them. I've got my 12 to 24 here. This photo here was taken with a 50 millimeter lens, and so I did want to show you the difference. And I'm not saying that you cannot achieve background blur, for example, the bokeh, with only telephoto lenses. That's not the case, but in this particular case, I shot this at f3.2. It's a wider lens at 50 millimeter. And part of the reason is I did want to give a tiny sense of place. It does give me a little bit of depth here to show where the subject is in relation. The client also asked specifically for this style, and so that's what we did. And they were happy with the results. I mean, just the 50 millimeter lens is a banger of a lens. I mean, it's incredibly sharp. I mean, this lady, first of all, is absolutely stunning, but second of all, the bokeh, it's a little more, I'm not sure how to really describe it. It's a little more like jagged and not quite as blown out. Granted, again, in the other examples that we were looking at, this is the difference between 400 millimeter f2.8 and something wider, like a 3.2 at 50 millimeters. So you can still achieve background blur with wider lenses. It really just depends on your setting and what your goal is to try to do. But I achieve my look and my photos through the background blur through telephoto lenses. So backgrounds can also be distracting or they can be enhancing. So I happen to have the FJ400 lights. I was first time setting them up, and of course I had to buy a fog machine because why not? So this is the first shoot that I did with it. And to me, these lights and the cover-ups on the lights are pretty much like the ultimate way to show anything sports, right? Because they're supposed to replicate stadium lights. So we set this up and we use them here. So something as simple as these lights are going to enhance your backgrounds. Now, sometimes things like this can be really distracting. So if you have a lot of distractions in your background that maybe don't fit the time and the place of your photo, that could also be a problem. So when you're positioning your clients or you're on a shoot, try to keep in mind the background and what do you think it's going to be there. So I saw an awesome review online about the 50 to 150, the new lens that's just out by Sony, and there's this beautiful red barn in the photo. And the photo, it was with a family that like owned this farm for, multi generations or what have you not. So the barn just really made sense for the photo. And it was also really an enhancer to the photo because it was so large and just a beautiful barn that was like sitting in the photo. So keep in mind your backgrounds can add or subtract goodness, as we say, to your photo. So here's another background here. Same kid. I made this super contrasty. We added a little bit of red for school colors in there and took the photo again. Same thing with the FJ400. So colors, shapes, sizes, reflections, all of these things can change your photo. So don't be afraid of your background and make sure to utilize the background in your shoots. The last photo that I really wanted to take a look at was this photo here. So this, I have 5 different versions of this photo, and I wanted to show the difference between the original and as I progressed in my editing, how changing the background changes the photo. So the initial photo here, let's go ahead and zoom out just a tiny bit. There we go. Okay, so here's the first photo. Second photo, it has a little bit of vignetting in it, as you can see. The third photo, I added, well, look at the difference in the leaves right in the background, right by his arms on both sides. Before, after. He stayed the same. Next, I went in for the contrast. So there's a huge difference in the photo between this and look at the contrast there. And then finally, on the bottom right-hand corner, you see a before and after. Before and after. So not only did I do a little skin retouching, but I also increased the contrast just slightly, cleaned it up, and just kind of got rid of that. It was just distracting to me, and I did not like that personally in my photo. So I cleaned up the skin a little bit, and voila. I knew that this was more of a shot up here that I wanted in particular. I like the headshot there. You can keep the full-length photo too if you want, but I think it was just kind of a great little example to show kind of everything. And finally, here is a photo of just everything being a little bit more in focus and including some of the, I guess it's a 4-ish background-ish trees there. So they're all gnarly and scraggly and cool. They really enhance the photo, even though the subject is clearly the riders on the horse, but the trees really enhance the image as a whole. Ironically, this is the same spot that I took this photo here. You can actually see the same tree is literally right here in the center. This is the tree right here that's in the same location. So killer spot. Once you have a killer spot for lighting and you really understand how the light reacts during different times of day, you can take incredible photos during that time. So don't forget your backgrounds, guys. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Instamaui Matt, and I'm a photographer living on the island of Maui, and we hope to see you in the next video. Aloha, ahui ho. Chee!